So this is how you can contact me. Yeah, this is a badge I made at OGF 30. And I continue to use the picture. Yes, it sums up all of the information you need to know about me. My email address, the fact that I'm an Australian in the Netherlands, and I grew up in the island state of Tasmania, named in honour of a Dutchman. When we're talking about web single sign-on technologies, there's three predominant technologies that are in use. There's OpenID Connect, SAML, and OAuth. Now, you might not be aware of these technologies, but you certainly do use them, often in the background of tools that are, are relevant to you. In fact, if you use Facebook or Twitter, and you have ever logged into other applications with Facebook and Twitter, you will be using OpenID Connect or OAuth as background authentication services. And so this distributed model of authentication is something that people interact with already. In fact, the most popular federated authentication service that you're likely to use in research and education is EduGAIN. And this is an authentication-only service that gives you access to Wi-Fi in now 60 countries around the world. So hopefully you use EduGAIN and you're familiar with the fact that the authentication is delegated back to your home institution. So the question is, why for the web environment would we use something other than Facebook or Twitter for authentication? And the reason that we use federated authentication is because it does allow it to be delegated back to a home institution. So this is on the right-hand side, you can see an example of a authentication dialog that's allowing you to choose a range of authentication services, including Twitter itself. And to the left-hand side, you actually see an example of an application called Ticker, which allows you to do different styles of authentication rather than just username and password. So for Facebook and Twitter, there's particular authentication types that they make available, but for federated authentication in our space, individual institutions get to choose the authentication model that's most appropriate for them. Now, I have some slides which are, I guess, reasonably technical in nature that show the authentication flow between an identity provider, a service provider, and a where are you from service. I don't think these are necessarily useful for you at this point in time. Feel free to have a look at these slides. They were made by KU Leuven in Belgium and are used as material in one of our training packages. This is an example of some of the organizations that provide federated identity within our community. So you'll see the Renater logo because they run a federation called FER, and there is the GAR IDEM logo for those in Italy. But there's also an array of other federated identity federation logos that are used. Now, for federated identity, we use different architectures for how they're coordinated. These are the three models that are used within our environment. On the left, you'll see that the login is at the center of the federation, and we connect up identity providers on one side, service providers on the other. So all authentication flows through the middle. This is a centralized hub and spoke federation. This is used in Croatia and in Norway, and I guess it's possibly most similar to the Facebook or Twitter model, but Facebook and Twitter only allow the login at the center. They don't allow that passing through to other identity providers. At the bottom, you have a full mesh federation where every service gets connected to every login system, and the login system is at the institutional level. And then you have this where are you from service to allow you to find the path from the service that you're accessing to the institution that you want to log in as. And then we have finally a distributed hub and spoke federation where the discovery service is in the middle, and that discovery service, this is the different federation architectures. So these are not equally used. Mesh is mesh down the bottom is the most popular that's deployed, and followed by hub and spoke with the delegated authentication, the one on the right-hand side, and then authentication within the middle is used in a limited number of federations. Okay, so what is EduGAIN, you may wonder, and how does this relate? Well, EduGAIN is made up of two parts. It's made up of a policy framework, which actually binds identity federations, research and education identity federations together, and a metadata distribution service. So if you look at this diagram, you'll see this sort of cloudy picture, which has the metadata distribution service, which actually distributes the equivalent of a phone book of who's part of EduGAIN and who's not. And then each federation decides to contribute certain services or certain institutional identity providers into EduGAIN. And those that are within the set of EduGAIN can all communicate with each other. Those that are outside can't. And there may be good reasons for doing that. This is not just a negative thing. There may be, nationally specific services that have no value to people in the wider world, so they don't need to be exposed further afield. Or there may be, other work that's required at those services to allow them to interoperate at a global level. So for EduGAIN adoption, there's this issue of width or breadth versus depth. And at the moment, we have very good width. We have a lot of federations participating, but in comparison with the total set of services and identity providers that are available, we don't have the depth. And we're looking for very useful and compelling applications and collaboration opportunities that will make people want to make that step from, our country does participate in EduGAIN, and our institution or our service should also participate. And we're hoping that a project such as CTA will be one of those compelling reasons. So this is a global map of interfederation participants at the moment. So you can see from this map the dark blue color. Hopefully it displays well on your screen. The gray does not display well on a data projector, but since we're all using our desktops, laptops, or iPads to view this webinar, it should be easy to see. So dark blue are those that are currently participating in EduGAIN. The lime color is those that are joining, and you can see that Portugal, Austria, and Japan are in the process of joining, and that we have candidate federations that have been approved for joining and slowly making their way toward that, or we're in discussions. So for people who have seen previous versions of this map, Austria is new because Austria, I get a little arrow maybe. Don't know if you can see this. Nope. Does my annotation work? I don't know. Anyway, nope, just keeps moving to the next screen. Anyway, so Austria is new. Austria has recently started the process of joining EduGAIN, and actually UK Federation have now passed the process of auditing their policy, and will hopefully be joining very soon as well. The next slide actually shows the CTA members and their federation status. So the red coloring are the federations that don't exist. that haven't yet participated in or don't have an identity federation or haven't got to the stage of being able to join EduGAIN. And so we can see from this list where we still have the 7 that were the case when we started this CTA assessment process. We've actually, a few more federations have popped up since. And they may be also valuable to CTA as a project because it may want to share with a wider community. So 20 CTA members with a federation, and that's the list. 7 currently without, and Argentina, Argentina and Mexico are supported by the El Cira project, and in fact, the one institution in Mexico does have an identity provider. They've done some work with the Science Gateway people, and I believe the guys from Catania. So they actually have an identity provider, and will hopefully be able to move quickly towards establishing a federation, and will actually cover what is required for CTA. The only country that doesn't have a project that is supporting an identity federation is Namibia. They only have one institution, so it's a small number of researchers and participants that aren't included, and there could be alternative services, including using science gateways with social identity providers in order to provide them access. So this is a breakdown. Sorry, lots of numbers, and if this is displayed on a small screen, it may be hard to see, but it shows that 12 federations support 100% of their CTA members, which is actually, I think rather excellent. 8 federations, the other 8 federations that make up the 20 that do exist covering CTA members, they have 38 of their members covered, 55 members not. So in fact, Italy is the biggest sort of target market there. Italy and Japan equally have 17 participant institutions that aren't part of their identity federation. Now, because of the structure of INFN, the situation may be better than this assessment shows, because of the way that organisation is structured and listed as participating in CTA. But that would require some further analysis in that regard. Out of the 7 federations that don't exist, there are 21 CTA members that need a solution. Either they need access via a social identity provider, or eventually the development of an identity federation. And in fact, as I mentioned before, Mexico has an identity provider for that partner. Poland is actually in the process of developing an identity federation now. South Africa similarly. So there's even more progress being made. So 80 of the participants have a federation and 76 need a solution. So while the percentage of federations is very high, the actual institutional participation is low. So how does CTA and EduGAIN look? Well, we actually have quite a lot of members of CTA federations, also a member of EduGAIN, and as I said, Austria has signalled its intention to join, is actually working on it now, and the UK will be coming soon. So there are then a group of federations that do exist, that are in development, and don't exist, and it's unclear, what the time frame for their for their creation will be. So it's highly likely that Slovenia and USA, because those federations do exist, their participation in EduGAIN could be brought forward. These developing federations, Poland is certainly going to be joining EduGAIN, and the other federations that are in development, are looking for an interfederation environment. Equally, Armenia Bulgaria and Namibia, if these federations do start up, they'll have initially no services. So in order to get more, to get access to services, to get access to more collaborators, they'll need a service such as EduGAIN in order to support this collaboration. There's also an EduGAIN video available to sort of explain interfederation to people, and I'll include that URL separately so Richard can add it into the slide notes, so that you can go through, and this might be useful for your service providers, identity providers, management within your organization on why you should invest in identity federation and why interfederation is a useful service for you. And we actually had some questions outstanding from EduGAIN, who wanted us to spend some time and get some questions and answers resolved on refining the CTA requirements for a single sign-on system and working on some recommendations towards the setup of a single sign-on service for CTA.
In slide number 3, you mentioned the 3 technological solutions to get access to now. What is the preferred to join EduGAIN?
Are you talking about the federation architectures?
No, the OpenID, the SAML version 2, and the AO.
Oh. Okay, so the only authentication service that EduGAIN uses is SAML2 at this point in time. So it's a SAML2 federation or a SAML2 hub that is required, to work with services within EduGAIN. If people have set up social provider bridges, and many have, then those social providers, they speak OpenID Connect or OAuth or some other protocol, and that bridge translates them to SAML for the SAML services on the other side. So you can actually build gateways to mediate between the different technologies. And there's been quite a few efforts in that regard. A simple SAML PHP, which is a technology developed by Uninet in Norway and supported by the community, does provide a lot of bridges to many popular social identity providers. There's also a social to SAML tool developed by Sunet in Sweden. It's often the case, though, that for many services, many institutions, they don't have any solution. So they don't already have a solution based on OpenID Connect. They generally have identity solutions that are built on LDAP or Active Directory, or they have an SQL database that's tied to an enrollment system or a library management system. So because they have no distributed identity management service, in fact, they might have EduGAIN, you can actually set up a service in front of a Radius server that EduGAIN uses to provide a SAML presence and exposure for your institutional accounts. So for institutions that have already have campus-based identity management systems, the added effort to expose those identities via SAML is much lower, because there are lots of solutions, lots of knowledge available within the community on how to use those. And in fact, SAML Identity Federation is not necessarily a new technology. They've been in development for almost a decade now, in Europe and the US. So there's a lot of knowledge around that. Equally, because they've been in development, it doesn't mean that it takes 10 years to develop an identity federation. We've actually we've created some within the last year of the GN3 project, and within GN3 Plus, we have the view of creating a few more. In fact, the Israeli Identity Federation it got created in about the space of 2 months. It went from no institutions and no services to 100%, which is admittedly only 8 of their universities participating in a space of 2 months. And that's because they had a particular application that they needed that was federated, and this was the easiest way for those 8 institutions to get access to this service quickly. Now that they've made that initial investment, there's now quite an array of additional services that they can get access to, which continues to add value to their current investment.
One more question.
Yeah.
Okay. What policies are? You say that EduGAIN is a set of policies. How can you explain this assertion? Policies, in my opinion, can be metadata or attributes, a namespace for attributes, or what else?
Yeah. So what we have is an EduGAIN declaration. It's available online. You can go to edugain.org/policy and see that. That's the document that organisations are required to sign, and they then agree to the EduGAIN Constitution, which sets out rules for membership, voting, and their ability to participate, and things that are required. Everything else is optional on top of EduGAIN. So actually, to actively participate, you need to produce a metadata file that complies with the metadata profile. But this is just to ensure that we know where the metadata is from and so that EduGAIN participant federations know who's published the metadata. So, for instance, Terena has some services that are in multiple federations. So when we started to create EduGAIN and we were aggregating the metadata, there were cases where multiple federations would publish a Terena service because it's in multiple federations. They would publish it to EduGAIN, and it would be listed multiple times. And so there's a need to work out who's publishing it and also who's authoritative for it. So we had to do some reconciliation there. So that's why we have a metadata profile, so that when we sort of aggregate this phone book up, you know who's published that information, and so that we've defined how the data will be shared between all participants. We've actually now removed the good practice profile and the terms of use from the current revision of the policy, because those were superfluous and they caused some problems for some federations. So we've been around for 2 years now, and so we've worked out which parts of the previous constitution were confusing for federations or caused problems. Because obviously, when we developed the constitution for EduGAIN initially, we only had a limited number of federations, active in that work, and the absence of a wider set of eyes looking at this, we ended up generating some problems for ourselves. And we've now overcome that, and we've made a version 2 of the declaration in the Constitution, which removes some barriers which caused UK Federation and Austria to be unable to join, and so we're hoping now that that policy side has been overcome, it will be much easier. We also have worked on something called the EduGAIN Code of Conduct, which is a document to assist the flow of attributes between national boundaries. So although we have data protection rules that are reasonably consistent throughout Europe, there's still a lot of confusion over what can and can't be shared and under what circumstances. And there's a provision within the data protection legislation to create a community of interest to come together and have an agreed process for sharing personally identifiable information under certain circumstances, and that's what we've developed. We've got some lawyers that are specialists in data protection, and where the middle of next month we'll be seeking an opinion from the Article 29 Working Party on whether this community of interest is appropriate, which we think it is, the Cherenkov community, and whether the use of this code of conduct within that framework complies with the data protection rules. Obviously, policy can seem very burdensome, but it's a necessary evil. The technology very easily interoperates, making sure that policies do is much more difficult.
I've got a couple of questions. Sorry, this is Richard speaking.
Yep.
One of them is probably largely insignificant. The other one's more specific. Firstly, when you were talking your way through slides 18 and 19, at some stage you said our country, and so my question really is, which country are you talking on behalf of when you say that?
That would have been a mistake, 18 and 19, because EduGAIN does not, it doesn't specify national federations. So if I use national, then that was a mistake. We've tried to remove that. We actually do have the situation where there are multiple identity federations within a country, and there is actually a schools federation in addition to the FER federation in France, and they're going to use EduGAIN to interoperate between their two federations. So there'll be more than one federation from a single country. Equally, there is a federation called Confia in Andalusia, or within Spain, and equally, they're able to join. So you don't have to be a national identity federation. So I apologize. Equally, national identity federation has it's problematic in some parts of the world, to say that, and so federations, only have to be primarily for research and education. They don't have to be anointed as national. They can be regional. They could be supranational if such a federation existed. Often because of legislative reasons, there is federations are usually contained within one legislative region.
Okay, thanks for that. And then the other question is with regards to slide 23, which I thought was a very interesting slide. Bullet number 5 down there, 55 CTA members need to be connected. That sounds like an issue worthy of some effort, especially when you look at Germany having 5 members, Italy having 17, Japan having 17, where I presume they're people that are really important to us. So the question here becomes one of how can this VT help accelerate the connection of all those members who are out there? How can we help do that? And I guess for the VT as a whole, how important are these unconnected members to us, and do we need to prioritize them?
Yeah, I think just a part of the slide is obscured. So yeah, so Italy, for some reason I have Italy only listed as one actually being federated, which I think is possibly quite low. INFN is a distributed organization, so I'm not too sure how distributed their identity management is. So this number 17 not connected might be might be incorrect because of the
Right.
way IMFN is structured. Now, certainly GAR and IDEM, their identity federation, is in fact it's the biggest participant so far in EduGAIN. So they are very active within EduGAIN, and they're very active within their own country.
Who's that?
GAR, the Research Education Network in Italy.
Okay.
So GAR run the federation called IDEM, IDEM, and it's highly likely that GAR do have the manpower, to be able to support those organisations, because their federation has developed so quickly. And actually, we're working with GAR on some infrastructure work to make the identity registration, the registration of identity providers from the institutions an easier process. So it could also be a language issue that when I did this mapping, I haven't mapped organisations appropriately because the CTA website lists the name of the institution, and maybe I've not mapped it correctly from the list of identity providers that are within GAR. The same with Japan. It's highly likely that some of the Japanese institutions only have their Japanese name associated with them within their federation. So it's difficult to work out whether they are already connected.
That's interesting, because I guess that really means that, again, inward-looking as we need to be within the virtual team of CTA, this is an interesting snapshot, but we don't know how important or not the snapshot is to us unless we give it a little bit more thought.
Clearly, I think Argentina is going to be the site for this array. Anyway, isn't it? It's going to be built in Argentina. So clearly, that is an important site. And if you saw the other worldwide participation image, you'll notice that Chile has an identity federation. Their identity federation is called COFRE, and the reason their identity federation exists is because there's so much activity in telescope projects in Chile that there's a need for them to create a federation and participate in the global community because of the infrastructure. So I think a project like CTA will engage more institutions to want to participate, and once they've participated, maybe there are researchers within those institutions that want to use other services, but they're not involved in projects that are as prominent as CTA.
And I mean, just looking at that map, as you quite rightly say, Chile, very important. It's been involved in the business for a long time. Argentina coming up in prominence, Namibia and South Africa, important again from the SKA perspective.
Exactly. So the Australian Access Federation is quite well deployed, but not a member of EduGAIN at this point in time. But certainly they've had a long-standing federation. South Africa is developing a federation. Tenet and CSIR in South Africa are developing an identity federation. They've actually had some consultants from WAIF in Denmark go and do some courses in South Africa to bootstrap their federation, and it's highly likely that they'll come on board very quickly. They've done a very significant EduGAIN deployment in their country, and so we expect their identity federation to be, equally, well established. And I'm not too sure of the knowledge transfer between South Africa and Namibia, but in fact, there's only one participating institution in Namibia, so they could be brought on, using a guest or a social service, a social identity provider gateway for CTA infrastructure.